The fluorescent lights of the Walmart in Flagstaff, Arizona, hummed a low, constant drone, a sound that became a part of the air itself after a while. For Ethelred, it was the soundtrack to his life. Ethelred was 24, with a tired face that seemed perpetually dusted with the fine powder of sleepless nights, and a body built for moving boxes, not for running from unseen horrors. He was a night stalker, a ghost in the vast, empty aisles, his only company the creaking of his pallet jack and the occasional echo of his own cough. The night had begun like any other. A truck full of merchandise, a handwritten manifest, and the predictable grind of stacking shelves. But tonight, a new hire named Finn was shadowing him. Finn was fresh-faced and full of nervous energy, his eyes darting around the colossal space as if expecting something to jump out. Ethelred, jaded and pragmatic, found his naivete amusing. "Heard they say this place is haunted," Finn whispered as they wheeled a pallet of canned goods down aisle 7, the pet food aisle. The air here was heavy with the smell of dry kibble and something else, a faint, sour odor that Ethelred had always just assumed was a cleaning product. Ethelred grunted, not looking at him. "It's a Walmart, kid. The only ghosts you'll see are the ones who died inside from boredom." Finn didn't laugh. "No, for real. People say things move. And the cameras? They've got dead spots." Ethelred just shrugged, but a memory surfaced from deep within his tired mind. The old stalker, Marlowe, who had retired abruptly last month, had mentioned the dead spots. Not in the main aisles, but in the back rooms, where the cameras would inexplicably flicker and die for a minute or two. Everyone had dismissed it as a glitch in the ancient security system. As they worked, a sound started from the far end of the store near the seasonal section, a single distinct roll of a shopping cart wheel, followed by silence. Ethelred froze, listening. "Probably just the wind getting in through a loading dock door," he mumbled, more to himself than to Finn. But the loading docks were all sealed shut. Then it happened again. This time, it wasn't a single roll. It was a slow, deliberate creak, as if someone was pushing a cart through the darkness, stopping and starting. Ethelred grabbed his flashlight, its beam a weak spear of light in the dim store. He aimed it down the main aisle, but there was nothing. The checkout lanes were empty, the customer service desk a desolate island. The silence was absolute, heavy and suffocating. Finn's breath was coming in short, panicked bursts. "See?" Finn whispered, his voice trembling. "I told you." "Shut up, Finn," Ethelred hissed. "It's nothing, just a trick of the echo." But then the music started. Not the cheerful, tinny pop songs that played during the day, but a strange, distorted melody that seemed to be coming from the speakers themselves, a song without words, just a series of long, melancholic notes. It was a tune Ethelred had never heard before, but it felt sickeningly familiar, like a half-remembered nightmare. The volume was low, almost imperceptible, but it seeped into every corner of the store, making the silence between notes even more jarring. They started to work faster, their rhythmic movements now frantic. The weird melody continued, a subtle torment in the background. Ethelred kept his eyes on the ends of the aisles, but he couldn't see anything. The shadows, once just a natural part of the store's architecture, now seemed to possess a life of their own, coiling and uncoiling in his peripheral vision. Then, a sudden sharp clang echoed from the back of the store, the sound of something falling in the grocery section. Ethelred grabbed his two-way radio, his hand shaking. "Code 10, we have an audible disturbance. Anyone else hearing this?" The radio crackled with static, but no one answered. The night manager, a perpetually weary man named Dale, was probably asleep in his office. Ethelred tried again. "Dale, are you there?" Only the static responded. Finn looked at him, his face pale in the dim light. "I'm not doing this, man. I'm going home." "You can't," Ethelred said, a chill running down his spine. "The doors are locked. We're on the night shift." As if on cue, the music stopped. The silence that followed was worse than the sound. The air grew colder and a new smell, the scent of damp earth and something sweet and decaying, filled their lungs. Then from the far end of the store, near the frozen foods section, a child started to cry. It was a soft, whimpering cry, the kind a lost toddler might make. Ethelred's blood ran cold. The store was locked. There were no kids here. There couldn't be. Finn let out a small whimper himself. "No, no, no," he muttered, shaking his head. The crying grew louder, moving closer, and with it came the sound of small, shuffling footsteps. Ethelred's heart hammered against his ribs. He gripped the flashlight tighter, but the beam felt like a useless toy against the oppressive darkness. The footsteps stopped a few aisles away, in the home goods section. Ethelred could hear them shuffling behind the stacks of towels and bed sheets. He could almost feel a presence there watching them. Then a voice. It wasn't the voice of a child. It was a high, distorted whisper that seemed to emanate from everywhere at once, from the very walls and floors of the store. "Help me." Ethelred's breath hitched. Finn let out a blood-curdling scream and ran, bolting down the main aisle toward the front entrance. Ethelred, against all logic, stood frozen. The whisper continued, now closer, directly behind a towering stack of bath towels. He took a hesitant step toward it, and that's when he saw it. A faint handprint, impossibly small, appeared on the outside of a clear plastic package of white towels, pressing against the plastic from the inside. The fingers were thin, too long, and they seemed to be trying to push their way out of the sealed bag. Ethelred stumbled back, his mind screaming in protest. The handprint pressed harder, the plastic creaking under the invisible pressure. He turned and ran, the whisper and the small, shuffling footsteps now chasing him down the aisle. He heard the whisper right behind him now, the sound no longer coming from everywhere, but from a single, impossibly close source. "Help me find them." He didn't look back. He ran past the checkout lanes, past the customer service desk, his mind a panicked mess. He saw Finn struggling with the main automatic doors, pounding on the glass, but they wouldn't open. The store, it seemed, wasn't letting them leave. Ethelred ran to his side, his hands fumbling for the key to the emergency exit. Just then, he saw a movement on the polished floor, a faint reflection in the slick surface. He stopped, his heart in his throat. In the reflection, he saw something standing a few yards behind them. It was a child, but not a normal child. Its body was gaunt and translucent, like a figure made of smoke. Its eyes were two hollow, dark pits, and its mouth was stretched into a wide, unnatural smile. It was holding a shopping cart, the same cart they had heard earlier. Finn didn't see the reflection. He was still screaming, pulling at the door handle. Ethelred wanted to scream too, but he couldn't. He was paralyzed, staring at the ghost child in the floor's reflection. The child slowly lifted its head, and its smile widened even further. The words it had whispered earlier echoed in Ethelred's mind, but this time, the voice was a horrifying, gurgling sound. "Found you." The emergency exit door clattered open and Ethelred scrambled out, pulling Finn along behind him. The cool night air hit them like a slap, but it offered no relief. Finn, sobbing and gasping, collapsed on the pavement of the loading bay. Ethelred stood there for a moment, his chest heaving, his mind a chaotic mess of adrenaline and disbelief. The door slammed shut behind them with a final metallic thud. Did you see it?" Finn choked out, his eyes wide and terrified. Ethelred could only shake his head, his hands still trembling. He hadn't seen it with his own eyes, only its reflection. But the image was seared into his memory, the hollow eyes, the stretched smile, the skeletal frame. The ghost child. It was real. They were safe for now outside, but a new kind of dread settled in. They were trapped. They were on the night shift, their cars parked on the other side of the building, and the main entrance was 1,000 feet away. The only way back to their cars was to re-enter the store. "We have to go back in," Ethelred said, his voice a hoarse whisper. "We have to call for help." Finn stared at him as if he were insane. "You saw it. We're not going back in there. We'll stay out here until the morning." Ethelred's heart sank. He knew Finn was right. but the thought of standing in the cold, exposed parking lot for hours, waiting for the dawn, was almost as terrifying as the ghost child itself. He looked around. The loading bay was a desolate concrete slab, surrounded by towering dumpsters and a few stray pallets. The only other door was the one they had just exited, leading back into the darkness of the store. Then, from inside, came a new sound. It wasn't a whisper or a cry. It was the sound of a microphone, the kind used for the store's intercom system, being tapped. Tap, tap, tap. Finn's eyes went wide again. The speakers, they're on. The rhythmic tapping was followed by a long scraping sound, as if the microphone was being dragged across a rough surface. Ethelred felt a wave of nausea. He knew where that microphone was, at the customer service desk, the same place he had seen the reflection of the ghost child. Then, a voice crackled over the intercom system, a high-pitched, distorted version of the one they had heard earlier. It was a child's voice, but it was speaking an adult's words, and they were twisted into a grotesque imitation of speech. Attention, Walmart. Shoppers. We are now closed. The voice paused for a moment, and then a new sound came through the speakers. A slow, deliberate breathing, a wet, guttural inhale, and an even slower exhale. It was the sound of someone right next to the microphone. The breathing was uneven, labored, as if it belonged to someone who had been holding their breath for a very long time. Ethelred instinctively pressed himself against the concrete wall of the building, his body trembling. He and Finn were listening to a ghost breathe. Then, the breathing stopped and the voice returned, now a whisper that carried over the store's entire PA system. I am still here. Ethelred and Finn looked at each other, their faces pale. The store, which had once felt like a mundane, safe place, was now a monstrous entity, a living, breathing thing that was hunting them. Finn started to run, not toward the street, but back to the loading bay door. We have to go back in, Ethelred. It's safer inside. What? No, it's not. Ethelred grabbed his arm. It's waiting for us in there. But Finn's panic had overtaken his logic. He was convinced that the cold, dark night was a greater threat than the unknown terror lurking inside. He yanked his arm free and began to pound on the metal door, screaming for someone to let them in. Suddenly, the intercom crackled again. He wants to come back in. Ethelred's blood ran cold. The ghost child, or whatever it was listening to them. It knew they were outside. It was toying with them. The sound of Finn's frantic pounding echoed in the night, a desperate plea that was being mocked by the store's own voice. Ethelred backed away from the door, his eyes darting around the loading bay. He knew he had to get away from the store, but where could he go? The fence that surrounded the property was too high to climb, and the only gate was near the main entrance, which was locked and under the watchful eye of the entity inside. He felt a sudden sharp pain in his hand. He looked down and saw a deep gash bleeding profusely. He hadn't noticed it before. He must have cut it when he was fumbling with the keys to the emergency exit. The cut was deep, and it throbbed with a sickening rhythm. Then, he heard a new voice. It was coming from the dumpsters. It was a familiar voice. Marlowe, the old stalker. Ethelred. Ethelred. Over here. Ethelred's heart jumped into his throat. He peered into the darkness between the dumpsters. He couldn't see anything, but the voice was clear, a raspy whisper. It knows you're here. It knows you bled. It's coming for the blood. Ethelred's eyes went wide. He looked at his hand, the blood now a thick, dark stain against his skin. Marlowe's voice was a ghost in the machine, a warning from beyond the grave. Don't go in. Don't go in. Suddenly, the loading bay door behind Finn rattled violently. The pounding wasn't coming from him anymore. It was coming from the inside. Ethelred watched in horror as the door bowed inwards, a large dent forming in the metal. Finn, still in a state of panic, was now frozen in place, his face a mask of terror as he watched the door being pounded from the other side. The voice on the intercom, the ghost child's voice, began to sing, a horrifying, childlike nursery rhyme that was both cheerful and utterly terrifying. "I see you, you see me, let's play a game of hide and seek." The door buckled again, this time with a horrifying groan of metal, and the top hinge broke. The air around Ethelred grew colder, the scent of damp earth and decay growing stronger. He knew, with a certainty that chilled him to the bone, that the entity was no longer just inside the store. It was coming for them. Finn's screams were now a high-pitched wail as the door finally gave way, a single hand reaching through the gap. A hand impossibly long and gaunt, its fingers bony and sharp. It wasn't a reflection this time. It was real. Ethelred, his mind a panicked mess, had only one thought: run. He turned and fled into the darkness of the parking lot, leaving Finn behind, his screams swallowed by the night and the sickening laughter of a child. Ethelred ran until his lungs burned, until his legs felt like lead. He didn't know where he was going, he was just running. He finally collapsed behind a line of parked cars in the deserted lot, his body shaking uncontrollably. He had left Finn behind. He had heard his screams, and he had run. The guilt was a heavy, suffocating weight. He looked at his bleeding hand, the cut now a dark, sticky mess. Marlowe's warning echoed in his mind. It's coming for the blood. He knew he had to stop the bleeding, but he had nothing. He could only press his other hand against the wound, a futile attempt to staunch the flow. He looked back at the Walmart, a vast, dark monolith under the pale moonlight. The store was silent now. The intercom was off, the ghost child's laughter gone, but the silence was a trick, a temporary reprieve. He knew it was watching him. Suddenly his phone buzzed in his pocket. A text message. He pulled it out, his fingers fumbling with the screen. It was from an unknown number. The message was a single word: run. Ethelred's blood ran cold. The message was accompanied by an image. It was a screenshot from a security camera, a grainy, black and white picture of him, standing behind the cars, his face a mask of terror. The camera's timestamp read 2:15 a.m., the exact moment the picture was taken. The camera's location was listed as Loading Bay, Camera 4. But he was on the other side of the building, and the cameras were supposed to have dead spots. He felt a new kind of dread, one that transcended the fear of a ghost. The ghost wasn't just in the store, it was everywhere. It was in the technology. He looked at his phone again and a new message appeared. This time, it was a video. He clicked on it, his heart pounding. The video was a shaky first-person perspective shot from a phone. It showed the inside of the Walmart, the aisles a silent, desolate maze. The camera moved slowly, deliberately, down the main aisle, past the checkout lanes, and toward the customer service desk. Then, the camera stopped. It was pointed at the service desk where the microphone sat on the counter. A single small hand reached out and touched the microphone. The hand was gaunt and skeletal, its fingers too long. The camera panned up, and Ethelred saw a face. It wasn't the face of the ghost child he had seen in the reflection. This face was different. It was the face of an old woman, her skin wrinkled and translucent, her eyes hollowed out and black. But the most horrifying thing was her mouth. It was stitched shut with a thick, coarse thread. Ethelred dropped the phone, his mind reeling. A child and an old woman. What was happening? He looked at the phone again. The video was gone. The text messages were gone. The only thing left was a single, new message. I told them not to come back. They didn't listen. The message was from the same unknown number. He looked up, his eyes scanning the parking lot. A faint whisper, a voice without a source, drifted on the wind. He told you to run. He was a fool. Ethelred's stomach churned. He knew who he was. Marlowe, the old stalker. He hadn't just retired. He had been a victim of this place, just like Finn was now, and just like he was about to be. He looked back at the store, at the main entrance, and he saw it. A single shopping cart sitting by the automatic doors, its wheels gleaming in the moonlight. A new kind of whisper, not from the air, but from inside his own head, began to speak. "The children are hungry. They want to play." The words were spoken in the old woman's voice, a dry, raspy sound that made his ears ache. He looked at the shopping cart, and a new text message appeared on his phone. It was another image. This time it was a picture of the inside of the cart, and inside, curled up in the metal wire, was a single, small, child's shoe. Ethelred felt his sanity slipping away. This wasn't a ghost story. This was a nightmare. This was a place where something terrible had happened, something so awful that it had imprinted itself on the very fabric of the building, on its technology, on its very existence. The old woman, the ghost child, the voices in the darkness, they were all a part of a single malevolent force. The Walmart. The store itself was the ghost. He got to his feet, his mind racing. He had to warn someone. He had to tell someone what was happening in this place. He had to expose the horror that was living inside this building, the horror that had taken Finn and Marlowe before him. He had to run. He turned and started to sprint toward the road, his heart pounding, his feet a blur. But as he ran, he heard it. The sound of a shopping cart wheel, slowly, deliberately, rolling along the pavement behind him. He didn't look back. He couldn't. But the sound didn't go away. It grew closer. A new text message appeared on his phone, the screen lighting up his face with a chilling glare. "Don't worry. We'll play with you forever." He stumbled, his body crashing into a parked car. He looked up, and his eyes met the reflection in the car window. It wasn't his reflection. It was the old woman, her face a horrific mask of stitched-up skin, her eyes black pits of nothingness. She was standing right behind him, her hands on his shoulders. Her voice, no longer a whisper but a sickeningly loud cackle, filled his ears. "You're not leaving. You're staying with us." The cackle was joined by a chorus of childish laughter, a high, mocking sound that seemed to come from all around him. Ethelred screamed, his body writhing in a desperate attempt to break free. But the old woman's grip was like iron. He could feel her thin, cold fingers digging into his skin. He was going to die here. In the parking lot of a Walmart, a place where people came to buy milk and cereal, a place where no one would ever believe a ghost story, a place where he would be just another lost soul, another echo in the endless silent aisles. As his screams faded into the night, the automatic doors of the Walmart swung open, and the faint melancholic melody of the ghost song drifted out into the darkness. It was a funeral dirge for Ethelred, and for all the others who had been foolish enough to work the night shift. The Walmart in rural Boone County, Missouri, was more than just a store. It was a relic. Its faded blue sign, slightly askew, seemed to mourn the passing of an era. Cassian, a night stalker with a quiet disposition and a strange obsession with local history, felt its age in his bones. He wasn't a stalker by trade, but an amateur historian collecting forgotten stories from a town that was slowly fading away. His job was a means to an end, a way to access the store's deep, dark corners after hours. His obsession was the reason he was in the dusty, forgotten storage room beneath the frozen food section. The room was supposed to be empty, a relic of a time when the store was a smaller, family-owned market. But a week ago, he had found a loose brick in the wall revealing a small, hidden space. Inside, he found a single object, an old, silver camera. It was a Polaroid model, heavy and cold to the touch, with a thick leather strap that felt strangely soft against his palm. The camera was a marvel of forgotten technology. Cassian, with his passion for artifacts, knew it was an old model, but the serial number was gone, scraped off the metal housing. The lens was pristine, and a single faded Polaroid photo was still inside the compartment. He pulled it out, and the image slowly developed, revealing a young man with a wide, unsettling smile standing in what looked like the electronics aisle of the store. But the man wasn't smiling at the camera. He was smiling directly at something just outside the frame, his eyes full of a strange, possessive glee. The next night, his curiosity got the better of him. He brought the camera with him to work, along with a few new packs of Polaroid film he had found on eBay. His co-worker, a grizzled old man named Silas who had been working at the store for 30 years, was unimpressed. "That thing's a relic, Cassian, just throw it out." "It's a piece of history," Cassian replied, holding the camera with an almost reverent touch. That night, as he stacked boxes of cereal in aisle 9, he decided to take a picture of his workplace. He aimed the camera at the empty aisle, the long rows of boxes and cans stretching into the dim fluorescent light. The flash was a blinding burst of white light in the darkness. The camera whirred, and a fresh Polaroid ejected from the slot. He held it, watching as the image slowly materialized. It was aisle 9, just as he had seen it. But it was different. In the picture, the shelves were fully stocked with brands that had been discontinued decades ago. The floor was not the polished tile of the present, but a dirty linoleum surface. And standing in the middle of the aisle, right where he had been standing, was a faint, shadowy figure. It wasn't a ghost in the traditional sense. It was a man, his face obscured by the blur of the old camera's lens, wearing a checkered uniform Cassian had never seen before. The man was holding a long iron tool, his posture rigid and unsettling. Cassian felt a shiver run down his spine. The camera was not just taking pictures. It was taking pictures of the past. He ran back to the storage room, the old Polaroid clutched in his hand. He looked at the camera, a cold metallic lump in his palm. A new dread settled over him. He took another picture, this time of the storage room itself. The flash went off and the Polaroid slowly materialized. He looked at it, his heart pounding in his chest. The room was unchanged. The dusty shelves and the loose brick were still there. But in the corner where a stack of empty pallets now sat, was a child. A small boy, no older than 5, with wide, terrified eyes. He was standing completely still, his hands clasped together, and he was staring directly at Cassian. Cassian dropped the camera with a clatter. His mind screamed in protest. He had just taken a picture of the past, of a child who was no longer there. But the fear wasn't in the image. It was in the child's eyes. They weren't just terrified, they were pleading as if begging him to do something. That's when he heard it. A faint, almost imperceptible sound coming from the aisle above him. The rhythmic clinking of an iron tool against something hard. He knew that sound. It was the same tool the man in the Polaroid was holding. The past wasn't just in the pictures anymore. It was leaking into the present. The clinking sound grew louder, a steady, chilling rhythm from the frozen food section above. Cassian, his heart hammering against his ribs, picked up the camera. He felt an intense, irrational compulsion to use it again, to understand what was happening. He took a picture of the doorway to the storage room, the dark wooden frame standing in stark contrast to the sterile light of the present. The Polaroid developed, and a new image appeared. It was the doorway, but it wasn't empty. Standing just inside the frame, his face a distorted blur, was the man from the first picture. The checkered uniform was unmistakable, but this time, he wasn't holding the tool. He was holding something else, a small broken doll, its head dangling by a single thread. The man's body was twisted at an unnatural angle, as if he were trying to look at something that wasn't there. A cold dread washed over Cassian. The man wasn't just a part of the past. He was a part of the picture, trapped in the frame but trying to get out. The clinking sound stopped. A new sound replaced it. A low, guttural growl that seemed to vibrate through the concrete floor. It was a sound of deep, ancient rage. Cassian fumbled for his two-way radio, his hand shaking violently. "Silas, are you there? I need you to come to the back. Something's happening." The The radio crackled with static, and then a faint, raspy voice came through. It wasn't Silas. It was the man from the picture. He can't hear you. He's sleeping. Cassian's blood ran cold. The voice was distorted, but the words were clear. The man wasn't just in the picture. He was in the store, and he was using the store's technology to speak to him. The camera was a portal, a window to a time that was bleeding into his reality. He heard the sound of footsteps, slow and deliberate, coming from the aisle above. They weren't the footsteps of a human. They were heavy, dragging sounds, as if someone were walking with immense effort. The sound moved closer, toward the storage room's metal grate that led to the main floor. Cassian backed away, his eyes fixed on the grate. Then from the darkness of the grate, a face appeared. It was the man from the pictures, but it was no longer a blur. The face was gaunt and hollow, his eyes two dark pits of despair. His skin was gray and leathery, stretched tight over a skeletal frame. His mouth was open in a silent scream, a horrifying expression of agony and rage. The man wasn't a ghost. He was a memory, a moment in time that was struggling to break free. Cassian scrambled to his feet, a wave of terror washing over him. The camera fell from his hand, landing on the cold concrete floor with a thud. He looked at it, the silver casing gleaming in the dim light. He knew what he had to do. He had to destroy it. He had to close the door to the past before the man could fully cross over. He grabbed the camera, his fingers fumbling with the hard plastic. The man's face at the grate was now contorted in a silent plea, a desperate look that was somehow even more terrifying than the rage. Then, from the darkness of the grate, a small hand appeared, followed by another. The hands belonged to the child from the second Polaroid. The boy's face was no longer terrified. It was contorted with a silent, heart-wrenching sob. He was trying to pull himself through the grate, his small body a writhing mass of desperation. The growl from the intercom system returned, now a guttural roar. "Mine! He is mine!" Cassian froze, his mind a panicked mess. He didn't understand. Why was the man so desperate? Why was the child so afraid? He looked at the camera in his hand, a cold metallic weight. He had to take another picture. He had to understand what had happened. He pointed the camera at the grate, at the two faces screaming silently from the darkness. He took the picture, the flash a blinding burst of light in the dim room. The camera whirred, and a new Polaroid ejected. He looked at it, his hands shaking so badly he could barely hold it. The image was of the grate, but it was different. In the picture, the grate was not a grate at all. It was a small, locked metal door, and behind the door, the man and the child were standing together, their faces clear. The man was a Walmart employee from the 1990s, his uniform crisp and clean. The child was his son. The man was holding a small silver camera, his smile wide and unnatural, just like in the first Polaroid. But the child wasn't smiling. He was crying, his small hand holding onto his father's leg. In the man's other hand was the same iron tool, its sharp end dripping with a dark, glistening liquid. And behind them, a handwritten sign was taped to the door. "Out of service. Do not enter." Cassian finally understood. The man hadn't been screaming in rage. He had been screaming in agony. The camera wasn't a portal to the past. It was a prison, a moment in time where a terrible, unspeakable act had been committed. The man hadn't been a monster. He had been a victim. And the true monster was the store itself, a place that had sealed their fate, that had trapped them in a single, horrifying moment forever. The camera was the key, the only way out. The growling from the intercom system reached a deafening crescendo, and the grate began to bend and tear, the rusty metal groaning under the immense pressure. The man's face, now filled with a desperate plea for help, was contorted with pure, unadulterated terror. The child's hand reached out to him, a silent plea for rescue. Cassian knew what he had to do. He had to let them out. He had to use the camera to break the spell. But the voice from the intercom system, the voice of the store itself, was now a chorus of disembodied whispers, all speaking a single, chilling word. Mine. The grate above him finally tore open with a violent shriek of metal, and a cloud of dust and stale air billowed into the storage room. The man and the child from the Polaroid were no longer trapped behind the grate. They were standing in the room with him, their translucent bodies shimmering in the dim light. The man's face was still a mask of agony, his eyes pleading. The child's hand was outstretched, a silent cry for help. Cassian felt a wave of cold rush over him. They were real, and they were here. But they weren't the monsters. The store was. He looked at the camera, its silver casing still gleaming in his hand. He had to do something. He had to help them. But the chorus of whispers from the intercom system was getting louder, a cacophony of disembodied voices that seemed to be coming from the walls, the ceiling, the very air itself. They all spoke in unison, a low, buzzing hum of pure malice. Leave them. They are ours. They are a part of us. Cassian knew he couldn't leave. He couldn't abandon the man and his son. He held up the camera, his hand trembling. He didn't know what to do, but he knew the camera was the key. He had to use it to save them, to send them back, or to release them. Suddenly, the child stepped forward, his small body shimmering with a faint, ghostly light. He reached out and touched the camera, his small fingers wrapping around Cassian's hand. The camera grew warm, a strange, pulsing heat that radiated through his palm. A new voice, the child's voice, spoke directly into Cassian's mind. It wasn't a whisper or a growl. It was a clear, terrified thought. He made us do it. He made us stay. The man in the camera, he's not my father. He's the collector. He locks us in. Cassian's blood ran cold. The man in the picture, the one with the checkered uniform, wasn't the victim. He was the monster. He was the one who had trapped the child and his father in that moment, who had sealed their fate with the camera. The child's thought continued, now a panicked cry. He wants you too. He wants to take your picture. He wants to lock you in the frame forever. Cassian looked up, his eyes meeting the man's. The man's face, once a mask of agony, was now contorted in a wide, unsettling smile. The smile from the first Polaroid. His eyes were not black pits of despair. They were a burning, malevolent red. The checkered uniform, once a symbol of a forgotten era, was now a grotesque mockery of a uniform, covered in a strange, dark stain. The man from the picture, the collector, raised the iron tool in his hand, its tip dripping with a dark liquid. He took a step toward Cassian, his feet dragging against the concrete floor. The child screamed, a silent, mental cry that tore through Cassian's mind. Cassian, in a moment of pure animalistic terror, did the only thing he could. He pointed the camera at the man and took a picture. The flash was a blinding white light that filled the entire room. The camera whirred, and a new Polaroid ejected from the slot. He looked at the picture, his mind a panicked blur. It was a picture of the man, the collector, his face a distorted mass of rage and surprise. But as the image developed, something strange happened. The man's body began to fade, his form dissolving into a ghostly mist. The red eyes and the grotesque smile vanished, replaced by a gray, indistinct blur. The man was trapped in the picture, just as he had trapped the others. The room was filled with a final horrified scream, a sound that seemed to come from the very depths of the earth, as the man's ghostly form was pulled back into the camera, into the single, developing Polaroid. The scream was followed by a low, defeated groan, and then silence. The man and the child, the true victims, were gone. They were free. The whispers from the intercom system stopped, and the air grew still and quiet. Cassian was alone, standing in the middle of a dusty storage room, the cold Polaroid of a terrified man in his hand. He looked at the camera, its silver casing still warm. He had saved them. He had broken the curse. He felt a wave of relief, but it was quickly replaced by a new, chilling thought. He had the camera. the cursed, malevolent camera that could trap a soul in a single frame. He felt a sudden, irresistible urge to take a picture of his own reflection. Just one. Just to see what it would look like. He raised the camera to his face, his finger hovering over the button. The whispers, the chorus of voices returned. But this time, they weren't full of malice. They were full of a strange, possessive glee. Just one picture. Just one more. He's the one now. He's the collector. Cassian stared at his reflection in the dark lens of the camera, a small, terrifying smile slowly spreading across his face. He pressed the button. The flash went off, a blinding burst of white light in the darkness, and the camera began to whir, a new Polaroid slowly ejecting from the slot, a new soul waiting to be trapped forever.